The old teacher. Everyone forgot, returned to the school with a surprise. "You don't remember me, do you?" The old man's voice was calm, but there was something in it, a quiet hurt that made the young teacher stop. "I'm sorry, sir," she said politely, holding her clipboard tight. "Should I?" He smiled faintly. "I taught here once, a long time ago." She blinked, confused. "Oh, were you a substitute teacher?" He shook his head. "No, I was the English teacher." Then he tapped his cane once against the floor and looked around the hallway, the same hallway he had walked for 30 years before the world forgot him. His name was Mr. Brooks, and once upon a time, his classroom was the heart of this school. He taught kids who came from broken homes, kids who didn't believe in themselves, kids who had given up. He gave them words, hope, a reason to dream again. But dreams can make enemies too. 30 years ago, one jealous teacher accused him of crossing the line with a student. A lie that spread faster than truth ever could. No hearing, no defense, just a letter that said, "You're done," and that was it. The students forgot. The teachers moved on. The man who gave the school his soul was erased from its walls. Until today. He had been invited to the school's 50th anniversary. The new principal, young and eager, had found his name buried in an old yearbook. "Mr. Brooks, we'd love to have you as a guest," she had said. Her voice was kind, but it was the kind of kindness people give to strangers. Now, here he was, walking through those same halls with his old brown coat and a small wooden box under his arm. Students whispered as he passed. "Who's that?" "He looks lost." Probably a janitor. He didn't mind. He'd been invisible for years, but inside that box, the one pressed tight against his chest, was something they all needed to see, something that could change everything. He walked slowly toward the gym, where the celebration was being held. Loud music, laughter, shiny decorations. But when he stepped in, the laughter faded just a little. The principal noticed him and smiled politely. "Oh, hello, sir. Can I help you?" Mr. Brooks nodded gently. "Yes," he said softly. "I'd like to speak for a few minutes." "If that's all right." She hesitated. "Oh, well, we already have a schedule," he interrupted, his voice firm but kind. "I won't take long. I just want to say goodbye properly." The way he said it made her pause. Goodbye. Not hello. Something about that word made her nod. "All right, sir." After the student's performance, he smiled and whispered, "Thank you." He sat on the last bench in the corner. No one looked at him. No one recognized him. But as he opened that little box and looked inside, his eyes filled with tears. Not of pain, but of something else. Because what was in that box wasn't just a secret. It was proof. Proof of what really happened. Proof of the man he was. Proof that the truth never stays buried forever, and when he stood up to speak, the whole room would soon learn the real story of the teacher they forgot. The microphone squealed a little when the principal handed it to him. Everyone in the gym turned their heads, curious. On stage stood an old man in a wrinkled brown coat, holding a wooden box like it was made of gold. No one knew who he was. Some students whispered, "Who's he?" Others giggled. "Maybe the janitor wants to sing." He heard them. But Mr. Brooks didn't flinch. He just smiled, the way only someone who's lived through heartbreak can smile. Soft, knowing, forgiving. He stepped up to the mic. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm but heavy. "I used to teach here." Silence. A few older staff members looked at each other, trying to remember. He continued, "My name is Mr. Brooks. I taught English and literature here 30 years ago." The students kept quiet now. The principal forced a smile. "That's wonderful, sir. How nice of you to visit." But he shook his head. "Not to visit, ma'am. To finish something I started." He placed the box on the table and opened it. Inside were hundreds of folded papers, yellowed with time, edges torn, but each one neatly labeled. He picked up one and read aloud. "Mr. Brooks, thank you for believing in me when no one else did. You said I could write stories, and now I'm a journalist. You told me I wasn't a failure and I made it to college. He looked up. "These are letters. From my students." A soft gasp went through the room. He kept reading, voice trembling but strong. "You stayed late to help me when my dad left. You gave me books when I couldn't afford them. You made me feel seen." He smiled sadly. "I kept them all. Every single one." The principal blinked, realizing who he really was. "Wait, Mr. Brooks? You're the Mr. Brooks." He nodded slowly. "Yes, the same one they told to leave without a goodbye." A murmur spread through the room. Some older teachers looked down in guilt. The students leaned forward, silent now. Mr. Brooks continued, "They said I did something wrong, that I crossed the line with a student, but no one ever asked what really happened." He opened another folded paper, this one newer. "Dear Mr. Brooks, I'm sorry I didn't speak up back then. I was scared. They used my name to ruin yours. I was the student they said you hurt, but you never did. You protected me. You were the only adult who cared. Please forgive me. Rachel, class of 1993. The gym went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. He let the letter fall to the table, his hands shaking. "I lost my job, my name, my home. But I never lost faith that truth has a way of finding light." Tears filled the principal's eyes. The students didn't whisper anymore. Mr. Brooks smiled faintly, looking out at them. "Not angry, just tired. I came back today not for revenge, but to say this. A teacher's work doesn't end when he's forgotten. It ends when his students stop remembering what he taught them." He closed the box gently. "Today, I forgive this school. And I hope it forgives me too." For a moment, no one moved. Then, from the back of the hall, a woman stood up. Gray hair, teary eyes. She whispered, "Mr. Brooks." He turned, and when he saw her face, he froze. It was Rachel, the student who once cost him everything. "Mr. Brooks." Her voice trembled as she stepped forward, one shaking hand pressed to her chest. He turned toward her slowly, his old eyes widening, heart suddenly racing like it hadn't in years. There she was, Rachel, the girl who once sat in the front row of his classroom, quiet, shy, with big brown eyes that used to light up when she understood a poem. The same girl whose name had destroyed his life. Gasps rippled through the gym as the woman walked down the aisle. Her heels echoed on the floor, each step heavier than the last. She wasn't the timid girl he remembered. She was a grown woman now, mid-40s maybe, but her face still carried the sadness of someone who'd been holding a secret too long. She stopped in front of the stage, tears rolling down her cheeks. Do you remember me?" He nodded, his throat tightening. "I could never forget you, Rachel." The principal, sensing something powerful was about to happen, stepped aside. Every student fell silent. Even the air felt still. Rachel took a deep breath. Her voice cracked as she began to speak. "I was 16 when everything happened. Back then, my mom was sick, my dad had left, and I didn't have anyone to talk to." She looked down, ashamed. "You were the only person who ever listened to me. The only one who cared." Mr. Brooks blinked back tears. "You were just a child, Rachel. I did what any teacher should do." She nodded quickly. "I know, but the other teachers didn't see it that way. When I won that essay competition, they thought you helped me cheat. They started rumors. They said you gave me special attention. I was scared. I didn't defend you." Her voice broke. "They called me into the office. They said if I didn't say what they wanted, they'd expel me. I was a kid, Mr. Brooks. I didn't understand. I just wanted the noise to stop." The gym was dead silent. Tears streamed down her face as she said, "You lost everything because of me. And I've lived with that guilt for 30 years. Mr. Brooks stepped down from the stage, cane in hand. The crowd parted as he approached her. He looked at her. Not with anger, not even pain, but something softer. Compassion. "Rachel," he whispered, "I forgave you long ago." She shook her head. "You shouldn't have." He smiled gently. "That's what teachers do. We forgive our students, even when they don't forgive themselves." For a moment, neither spoke. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. "I wanted to give you this." He opened it. Inside was a check. A large one. I started a scholarship, she said through tears, in your name, for students who need help, the kind of help you once gave me. He stared at the paper, speechless. She whispered, "It's called the Brooks Foundation. It's to honor you and the man I should have defended." Every teacher, every student, every person in that gym stood frozen, eyes wet, hearts heavy. Mr. Brooks didn't move for a long moment. Then he stepped forward and did something no one expected. He hugged her. The crowd erupted in soft gasps, then applause. Even the principal wiped her eyes. When he finally let go, he whispered, "You've already repaid me, Rachel. Not with money, but with truth." And as they stood there, the forgotten teacher and the student who finally spoke, it felt like the past 30 years had melted away. But what no one knew yet was that Mr. Brooks had another surprise waiting inside that box, something even Rachel didn't know existed, and when he revealed it, it would bring the entire gym to tears. The applause slowly faded, but the silence that followed felt heavier, fuller, like everyone knew something sacred had just happened. Mr. Brooks stood on stage again, next to Rachel, the wooden box sitting between them. He looked down at it, his old fingers tracing its edge. There was still something inside, something no one had seen yet. Rachel turned to him, voice trembling. "Is there more, Mr. Brooks?" He nodded softly. "Yes, something I kept hidden all these years, not out of shame, but because I wanted to give it to the right people, at the right time." The principal stepped closer, whispering, "What's in it?" He smiled sadly. "Memories, and one last lesson." He opened the box again, this time slower, as if each hinge carried 30 years of unspoken pain. Inside was an old photo album, a stack of letters, and a sealed envelope marked, "To my students." He took out the photo album first. Its cover was cracked, the corners worn. He opened it and showed the pages to the crowd. Photos of him surrounded by students, young faces glowing with laughter. There were class trips, reading competitions, art fairs, every moment of joy that school had long forgotten. "That," he said, pointing to the pictures, "is what teaching really is. Not grades, not awards. Hearts. Hearts that remember what kindness felt like." He turned a few more pages, and there it was, a class photo from 1993. Rachel gasped softly. That's my class," he nodded. "The last class I ever taught." Then, from behind the photo, he pulled out a folded piece of paper and began to read aloud. "Dear future students, if you ever walk through these halls and feel unseen, please know that once a teacher loved you before he even knew your name. If you ever think one mistake defines your story, remember mine. The world may forget your good deeds, but your goodness will still change it quietly, one person at a time." His voice cracked as he continued. "I may be gone when you read this, but my hope is that kindness becomes the loudest subject in this school. Because no matter what they teach here, love is the lesson that matters most." By the time he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even the janitor in the back was wiping his face with a towel. Rachel held his arm as he gently placed the letter on the podium. The principal, tears streaming down her cheeks, said softly, "Mr. Brooks, I don't know what to say." He smiled. "Say this isn't the end. Say it's the beginning." Then he lifted a small golden key from inside the box, one that gleamed under the gym lights. "This key," he said, "belonged to my old classroom. I've kept it all these years, because I believed one day I'd come back, not to teach, but to remind you what teaching really means." The principal took the key with trembling hands. "We'll open it again, sir. And we'll make it yours, forever." The students erupted in applause. Not polite clapping, real applause. The kind that comes from somewhere deep. And as they stood, cheering the name, Mr. Brooks, he closed the box one last time, smiling through tears. He whispered to Rachel, "I guess the story isn't over after all." But as the crowd's noise filled the room, Rachel noticed something in his eyes, something that scared her. The light there was fading. She reached out to him. "Mr. Brooks? Are you okay?" He smiled faintly and whispered, "I'm just tired. But I'm happy." And then, before anyone could move, his body swayed slightly, and the box slipped from his hand. The room went silent. It happened so fast that no one even had time to breathe. One moment, Mr. Brooks was smiling. The next, the wooden box slipped from his hands and hit the floor with a hollow sound. "Mr. Brooks!" Rachel caught him just before he collapsed completely. The students froze, eyes wide, their laughter and whispers gone. The principal ran forward. "Call an ambulance." Several kids pulled out their phones, voices shaking. He was still breathing. Barely. His hand clutched Rachel's sleeve. She leaned close. "Stay with me, please. Don't you dare go." He opened his eyes slightly and managed a small, trembling smile. Don't cry, Rachel," he whispered. "It's okay. I got to finish the lesson." Tears streamed down her face. No, you're not finished yet." He looked around the gym, at the students, the teachers, the faces that had finally remembered him. "So many young hearts," he murmured, voice fading. "Promise me, don't forget what kindness looks like." "We won't," Rachel sobbed. "I promise." The paramedics arrived minutes later, moving fast, careful, gentle. They lifted him onto the stretcher, but even as they worked, his hand never let go of Rachel's. When the doors closed behind him, the gym felt like a church. Quiet, sacred. Everyone stood still, staring at the spot where he'd been. The principal turned toward the crowd, voice shaking. "He came here forgotten," she said, "but he reminded us who we're supposed to be." That night, the entire town heard the news. Mr. Brooks was in the hospital, unconscious but stable. Students who had never met him started writing cards. Former students, now grown adults, came to the school, asking how they could help. One boy said softly, "He made me want to be a teacher." Another girl whispered, "He made me believe I wasn't dumb." Rachel sat outside the hospital all night, clutching the old box. She opened it and ran her fingers over the letters, the photos, the key, every piece of his life's work. Then she found one more note hidden at the bottom, written in the same neat handwriting. "If you ever read this, it means I'm gone, or soon will be. Don't be sad. I got to see my students again. That's all a teacher ever wants. Remember, truth takes time, but it always finds its way home." By morning, the sun rose pale and soft through the hospital window. Rachel whispered, "You did it, Mr. Brooks." They know now. And somewhere inside that quiet room, it felt like he smiled. The next morning, the school was quiet in a way no one had ever heard before. The laughter, the noise, the endless chatter, all gone. It was as if the whole building itself was holding its breath, waiting for news. In the teacher's lounge, the principal stood in front of the staff with red, tired eyes. "They called from the hospital," she said softly. "Mr. Brooks made it through the night, but he's still unconscious." A wave of relief and sadness swept through the room. One teacher whispered, "That man taught more with a few words than we do in a whole semester." Students started bringing flowers. Some placed them in front of the old classroom door that had been locked for 30 years. Others taped handwritten notes to the wall. "Thank you, Mr. Brooks. You made me believe I matter. You never knew me, but you changed me anyway." Rachel came every morning, sitting in front of that door with the wooden box beside her. She would read the letters aloud, one each day, to keep his voice alive in those halls. A week later, Principal Reed called an emergency assembly. When the students gathered in the gym, she stood before them with the microphone, her voice steady but full of emotion. "Last week," she said, "a man walked into this school that most of us didn't recognize. But he reminded us of something we lost: kindness, respect, and heart." She paused, looking around at hundreds of tearful faces. "So today I'm making an announcement. From this day forward, room 104, Mr. Brooks' old classroom, will be reopened and renamed the Brooks Learning Center." Gasps filled the room. The students began clapping, slow at first, then louder, until the gym shook with sound. The principal smiled through tears. It will be a place where students can write, read, or just talk when life gets hard. Because that's what he did for others. That's how we'll keep his lesson alive. Rachel stepped forward holding the wooden box. And these, she said, opening it, belong here. His letters, his pictures, his truth. This box will stay in that room, so nobody ever forgets him again. Later that day, they placed the box on his old desk, sunlight streaming through the window like a blessing. Rachel ran her fingers across his nameplate, the one they'd just fixed above the door. Mr. Brooks, Literature and Life. As she left the classroom, she whispered, "You're home now, sir." That evening, the phone rang at the principal's office. She answered quickly. "Hello?" A voice on the other end said, "This is the hospital. He's awake." The principal froze, then smiled through tears. "He's awake," she whispered, and at that exact moment the bell rang, just as it had every morning of his teaching life. Only this time, it didn't sound like a routine. It sounded like hope. When word spread that Mr. Brooks had woken up, the whole town seemed to breathe again. The school halls buzzed with a quiet joy. Students carried flowers. Teachers smiled at each other with teary eyes. Even the janitor, who never talked much, whispered, "He made it. Thank God he made it." Rachel and Principal Reed were the first to reach the hospital. They carried the wooden box with them, the same one that had held all his memories. When they walked into his room, he was sitting up slightly, sunlight falling across his face. He looked weaker, smaller, but his eyes were the same, still gentle, still kind. Still him. Rachel rushed to his bedside. "You scared us," she said softly, trying to smile. He chuckled weakly. "Guess I just wanted to make a dramatic exit. But God wasn't ready for me yet." The principal laughed through tears. "The whole school's been waiting to see you. You wouldn't believe what's happening, Mr. Brooks." He tilted his head. "Oh?" Rachel nodded. "They reopened your classroom. Room 104. It's now the Brooks Learning Center." His eyes widened, filling with tears. "They did what?" She squeezed his hand. "Your students, old and new, come every day. They write letters, talk, read your favorite poems. You're still teaching even now." He closed his eyes for a moment, breathing shakily. "That's all I ever wanted." The door opened quietly, and a group of students entered, holding a stack of letters and a framed photo of him with his old class. One small boy, maybe 12, walked up shyly. "Sir," he said, his voice trembling, "I never met you, but when I read your letter on the wall, it made me want to be a teacher too." Mr. Brooks smiled, eyes wet. "Then I've done my job." The principal placed the wooden box on his lap. "We brought this back to you, sir. It belongs to you." He shook his head gently. "No, it belongs there, with them, with the dreamers." He opened the box one last time, taking out a small sealed envelope. "But there's one letter left. It's for you all." He handed it to Rachel. "When I'm gone, open it at the school. Promise me." Rachel nodded, unable to speak. He smiled, that same soft, peaceful smile he always had. "You know, I used to tell my students something, that the best stories don't end. They just find new readers. Looks like I finally proved myself right." A nurse stepped in quietly, adjusting his IV. "It's time for his rest now," she whispered. The principal leaned forward. "We'll be here, sir, when you wake up again." He nodded, eyes fluttering closed. "Don't worry. I'll be in room 104, in spirit." And as they left his room, Rachel looked back one last time and saw him smiling faintly in his sleep, like a man finally at peace with his story. But what they didn't know was that inside that final envelope was a message that would change the school forever. 3 days later, the news came. Mr. Brooks had passed away in his sleep, peacefully, quietly, just like he lived. The whole town mourned. The school lowered its flag. Classes stopped, and for the first time in years, every hallway fell completely silent. Not the silence of boredom, but of respect. That afternoon, Principal Reed gathered everyone in the gym. Teachers, students, janitors, even parents who had heard his story. Rachel stood beside her, holding the small sealed envelope he had given her at the hospital. The wooden box sat on the stage beside them. Its lid was open now, full of memories that no one would ever throw away again. The principal's voice shook as she said, "He wanted us to open this together." Rachel nodded, tears shining in her eyes. Her hands trembled as she broke the seal and unfolded the letter. The paper was thin and fragile, like him, but the words were strong. "To my students, my friends, and the school that was once my home, I don't want this to be a sad day. I want you to know that I left this world a happy man, because before I closed my eyes I got to see something beautiful. Forgiveness. Forgiveness is not about forgetting what hurt you. It's about remembering it without hate. You see, I wasn't sent away from this school because of cruelty. I was sent away because people were afraid of kindness that didn't follow rules. But kindness, real kindness, doesn't need permission. If you are reading this, promise me you'll keep helping others even when no one claps for you. Promise me you'll speak the truth even when your voice shakes. Promise me you'll never walk past someone who's hurting and pretend you don't see it. Because that's what I tried to teach all along. You are not your grades. You are not your mistakes. You are what you give. If I taught you that, then I did my job. With love, Mr. Brooks." Rachel couldn't finish reading. Her voice broke halfway through. The principal took the paper from her hands and placed it gently into the wooden box. No one moved. Students cried openly. Teachers stood arm in arm. And outside, as if the world was listening too, a soft breeze blew through the open doors. Warm, gentle, carrying the smell of rain and chalk dust. Then one student, the same little boy who had visited him in the hospital, stood up and said softly, "Can we name the library after him too?" The room erupted in quiet applause, not loud or wild, just steady and real, the kind that fills you up inside. A month later, the school unveiled a new sign above the library doors. The Brooks Library, where words never die. And in room 104, the Brooks Learning Center remained open every day. Students came not just to study, but to talk, to heal, to listen. Sometimes, when the sunlight hit just right, the dust floating through the air looked like chalk marks, like the ghost of a teacher still writing lessons no one would ever erase. Rachel came often. She'd sit at his old desk, reading one of his letters out loud to the students. And before leaving, she always whispered, "You did it, Mr. Brooks. They'll never forget you now." Because he was right. The best stories don't end. They just find new readers. And somewhere beyond those classroom walls, Mr. Brooks was smiling, knowing his story would keep teaching long after he was gone. The end.